Thank you very much for staying with us. We are still talking all things racial divisions rather, and racial tensions in not only cricket in this country, not only rugby in this country, but sport in general. And it's not only the athletes' lived experiences that we are speaking about. Of course, black journalists do go through quite a lot as well in the newsrooms around this country, where stories that should be told are not told, and that those they have to tell or do tell are stories that they don't really feel comfortable speaking about. Now, of course, Simnikiwe Xabanisa has just joined us as well on this panel. Sim, a very good afternoon to you, and I want to perhaps ask you this question about lived experiences by black journalists in this country. You yourself have covered rugby and cricket in this country and a lot of other sport at length for well over a decade, probably 2 decades now. Just the things that you've seen, that you've gone through, what do black journalists in this country actually experience?
You had to start with the age, didn't you? Listen, look, I remember actually the first time I went to a cricket game. I think Stuart was there, and we overheard a colleague say, geez, this transformation thing is going a bit too far, because obviously, it was one thing to allow the players, but it was quite another to allow sort of black journalists as well, because, the understanding was that, what do we know about the game? So that was my first introduction to sort of a cricket press box. Look, it wasn't better in the rugby side, because when I walked in first ever rugby writer to look the way I did at the time, which is skinny, dreadlocked, glasses, and basically the guys just started laughing. And look, I admit, I looked at it like an extra from Cool Runnings at the time, and I probably wrote. So it was an uncomfortable sort of introduction, but I like to think that yes, I've kind of earned my colleague respect.
Lungani, I don't want to make this just about black journalists. We could sit here and talk about the experiences we've had, and what we've seen, what we've heard, what we've been exposed to, and talk about how it's been the passion that has kept us going in this industry and how we love the sport that we cover. But it is about the athletes who do live this every day as they try and make a living off of this passion that they have. I want to take you to what Alvira Peterson said, and perhaps not, I'll paraphrase at least what he said was, essentially, I was a better cricketer than Boeta Dippenaar. I scored more runs and I had more of an impact in South African cricket than what he did, and yet he had a longer career than I did at national level, and yet here I am being called a quota player. What is a quota player, Lungani, and why are black, talented players being called quota players in this country?
Well, Morena, look, it's, the quota tag is, you just wear it directly if you're black on principle. You have to prove yourself otherwise. You walk into a dressing room, you walk into a newsroom, you walk into any position. The first assumption is that you're going to be inadequate, and you've then got to go above and beyond to prove otherwise in order to be accepted. And, the Ashwell and Alviro and a lot of guys who, when you look at their numbers, their careers, I saw Ashwell Prince put out a startling thing that the best times of his life were playing for Lancashire right at the end of his career, because they accepted him purely in his quality and nothing else. So if you played for your country and gone through everything that you've gone through for your country, scored hundreds in Australia, against Australia, but yet, you find that the closest thing to being accepted as a player for who you are is somewhere in the northwest of England. It's astonishing. But it's the problem with this quota label is that the first assumption is that any person of color stepping into this environment is not good enough. They've needed this helping hand. And it's wrecked. Forget careers. It's wrecked so many lives, because there's this question mark burning in the back of your head. And you see it in all facets of sport, on and off the field, where the assumption is, and again, I'll go back to this very mass racism of, as soon as you hear somebody speak, Like Umakhaya Ntini, for a lot of time, he was assumed as unintelligent purely because he doesn't speak English like somebody who's gone to a private school for his entire life. Forget that he speaks Xhosa in a way that most people dream of. Forget how he bowls. The perception is that purely on the basis that you speak in a certain way, you are a quota. We've literally yanked you out of the bush. We're doing you a favor, just giving you a uniform. And that perception is something that's, to this day, still pervades. So as soon as Lungani steps up and points out injustices and says that he suffered, he's considered ungrateful. As soon as you're a journalist and you're outspoken, you're speaking out of line, you're going too far, you're crossing barriers that you shouldn't cross. So this quota thing is, you're almost supposed to be subservient and humble and grateful for what you've got because, if we're being blunt, you could be like the rest and you could still be sitting in the bush not knowing anything about cricket. We've done you a favor by putting you into the school. We've done you a favor by giving this uniform and making you a provincial or a franchise or an international player. So, play your part and keep quiet and take your salary. And that's what you get, and I'm not talking about experiences that I've heard. I've played cricket at a provincial level. I've played cricket at an age group representative level. I've covered cricket around the world. I've shared meals with international players on tour when they know that their teammates are in other places altogether chilling. Yeah. And they're more comfortable sitting with a journalist who they know has lived this experience and shared this experience. So the fact that it still goes on today is astonishing. I've had national coaches tell me that they pick players that they trust. They pick players that they go to church with. Yeah. And they ask you what school you go to before they start answering your questions to understand whether you've got the rugby intellect to actually have a discussion with them or the cricket intellect to have a discussion with them. And as long as that still pervades in our system, it's going to happen. And a large chunk of the population is still not going to get the full narrative. You're not going to get the full answer as a journalist because somebody just doesn't recognize or respect your journey. What do you know? Looking like you, what do you know?
Yeah. Vata, we won the World Cup in rugby on the 2nd of November, 2019. We have not even hit 12 months since we won that World Cup. I was with you at OR Tambo International Airport interviewing children, grown people, black, white, colored, Indian, all races, all ages, all generations. We seemed united. The closest to that unity I'd seen was 2010, when the streets of Joburg, streets of Cape Town, streets of South Africa were all kinds of colors, and of course green and gold. Is that a lie? Are we united for 5 minutes, pretending to be at least, and then we go back to what we know. We go back to our default settings of, as Lungani says, you should be grateful that you're even in that jersey. You should be grateful that you've had the privilege of lifting that Webb Ellis trophy and having the title of the first black African to lift this trophy.
Morena, it's smoke and mirrors. We need to be honest about it. I went, just like Lungani and Simnikiwe, we were privileged enough to go to, former Mola C schools. And I come from a school with a rich cricketing background, and I was fortunate in one of these, low-level rugby teams, senior teams. I captained a guy like Justin Kemp, who ended up being at the Titans. And when you got there, and I had to cover cricket, Dave Nosworthy was the coach of the Titans. As much as he would listen to my questions and so on, and some of the white players there, you could see they actually didn't care. They looked at me first as a black person and not as a cricket reporter. As soon as Darrell Cullinan, who also comes from the same school, and Justin Kemp and I all started chatting to each other, these guys were all interested. Why are you guys chatting to him? I said, well, we come from the same school. And that is when a lot of the other players and management looked at me differently, And that's just a mirror of South African society. It's a mirror of then and now. It's all the same. And again, as Lungani said, as soon as you walk into a situation as a black reporter, the first assumption is that you're here because you're black. The first assumption is that, they're doing you a favor. No one is doing anyone a favor here. A guy like Liam Delcam has covered sport in this country longer than a lot of journalists have. He's he's traveled the Springboks, gone on golf tours. He's done everything to be done. A guy like, even Stuart Hess as well, has covered numerous World Cups. They're respected across the world. But here back at home, I can tell you now, here back at home, South African society will list you all the white reporters, past and present, and these guys' names will never get listed. Do you know why, Morena? Because they're first looked at as black. People look at the byline, and the first thing when they see the black byline, they'll probably move on to the next story and read another white reporter's story. So again, Morena, all of this is just a mirror of South African society. We may have been happy when Makhandin was taking wickets at Lords and so on. Hashim Amla was lauded across the world. We see his stats as well. Siya Kolisi, you can mention them. There's so many, The fact of the matter, Morena, is that those people are first seen as black before they're seen as South Africans, as coaches, as players, and now as reporters.
Simnikiwe, I want to bring you back into this, and perhaps, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time with us, but how do we get it right? And I say we as in black journalists, because, I'm not gonna be very polite in my choice of words. We are victims. How do we get it right and make sure that they get it right and make sure that the system gets it right?
Look, I think the simplest way to deal with anything is to actually talk about it. One of the things that shocks me about cricket and rugby in particular is that you've got all these scores of guys that leave under sort of dark clouds, and nobody bothers to walk up to those guys and say to them, hey, listen, what went wrong? We almost need to, for every guy that leaves the system sort of unhappily, we need to have some kind of exit interview, talk to the guy, ask him, what went wrong, what actually did work, and compile. It's got to that. I mean, I know it's 2020, but we're talking about a document that could maybe give everyone a guideline of how to handle transformation, because as things stand, flying by the seat of our pants isn't quite working, because you can set your clock by the fact that this is going to happen again. Give it another month or two, there'll be another incident, and we'll be back talking about these things again. Why don't we sort it out at long last? Issue out a document and say to your coach, this is how you deal with a player of color, because this is what they like, don't like. Obviously, everyone's situation is not going to be the same, but if you're not talking to people, how do you know what they're going through? And how do you know how to fix what you don't know sometimes, I guess? Otherwise, the other solution, this is all law, by the way. The other solution is just to just apply the law, to implement the law strictly, which then would basically make people out to be racist. And if that's what it has to take, then maybe so be it.
Nathi Mthethwa, the sports minister, did say, and he was essentially repeating what his predecessor, who Fikile Mbalula, was saying, to say that if there is no transformation in these sports, they will not be hosting any international events. So they will be banned until they get it right. This is an interview that we had with the sports minister a couple of days ago, where he said, they don't get it right, then I will be coming down hard on them. So perhaps, as Simnikiwe is saying, we need to put it into law to make them do it right. And that's the system when I say them. Simnikiwe Xabanisa, Liam Del Carme, Lungani Zama, Stuart Hess, and of course, my boss, Vata Ngobeni. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me for what is essentially an important chat, and a chat that hopefully does not end. Hopefully, as Sim said, we don't find ourselves in this position in a month's time with another athlete saying that you guys are just not getting it right. So hopefully this is not where it ends. We continuously have this discussion, because whether it is liked or not, black lives do matter. And on that note, that's where I leave it for now.